walkout, which was a very dramatic walkout by the entire opposition. That was on the Bofes issue. I am not very much impressed by this concept of productivity, Parliament. Because after all, it is not a factory or something, where the productivity is very important. Parliament is the law-making body, like a lotus flower. A lotus, it sprouts in the water, but it is not affected by, it is not influenced by, in any way by the water or the mud around it.
Right.
So, remains unattached. Whatever be the politics, we are not getting involved in that. Oh, Vajpayee was a fantastic person, a great orator.
Yes.
And a person who was cast in the Nehruvian mold, I must say. Because he inherited all that was started or laid down by Nehru. So, very sophisticated, had a clear vision about things, a larger vision. He's a person who would take everybody along.
Right. Okay.
Such leaders are very rare. A member of Parliament, they are lawmakers. So they are passing the law. So for that they must understand what the law is.
Yes.
Everybody is not a lawyer.
These days, MPs have come up with new forms of protest like slogans, placards, bands, and T-shirts and bags with something written on them. Are they allowed as per the Lok Sabha rules?
These are not allowed. Even if the rule doesn't say anything about, I would say these are not to be allowed.
Hello, this is Soumya Gupta and you're watching Sunset Flicks. It gives me immense pleasure to bring to you today's guest, a person who truly needs no introduction in the realm of constitutional law and parliamentary procedure. We are honoured to be joined by Mr. P.D.T. Achary, one of India's leading constitutional expert and the former Secretary General of the 14th and the 15th Lok Sabha. We welcome you here, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, before moving on in the interview, I would like to apprise you of the structure of the interview. The interview is structured in a manner that it covers some parts of the constitution, some parliamentary procedures, and some portions of the legislative functioning. Towards the end, we have a fun activity planned for you and of course for the viewers. So stay tuned till the very end of the video. Sir, my questions are across topics. I will be jumping from one issue to another since we are short on time, and I wouldn't want to miss the opportunity to ask the constitution expert himself about some pressing issues. But before jumping into the political debates, let's start with something more personal. So let's walk down the memory lane a bit. How was a typical day for you as a Secretary General of the Lok Sabha? What was the most exciting part of the day, and how did it differ between the intersession and the session period?
Well, I won't say that it was very exciting as such, but it was a tension-ridden kind of thing. Because Secretary General, in a way, is in charge of the House. And whatever goes on there inside the House, Secretary General kind of controls it. Controls in the sense, of course, Speaker is the person who presides over the House. But that is the visible thing. But we operate at the invisible level. Everything that goes in the House, goes on in the House, on a particular day, it is actually the Secretariat, which gets involved in everything. Right from receiving the notices and pushing it up to different levels where the whole thing is examined in terms of the rules. And then it comes to me as a Secretary General. I take a look at it and then I push it on to the Speaker. So the Speaker sees it and a decision is taken. So that is how things are decided. A member comes and gives a notice, say for an adjournment motion. Notice is given. He will just write 4 lines Then it goes to a particular officer, it goes there, he examines it in terms of rules and he writes a note saying that we should allow it or not allow it. He gives his reasons, comes to me, I take a different view maybe. Then I go to the speaker and I advise him either to accept it or not to accept it. That is how it happens. And then when the House begins, you know, the real tension begins there. Secretary General has to ensure that the House, everything goes on in the House in accordance with the rules and procedures. He is the person who has to keep a watch on everything. If a member raises an issue, suppose he has used some words or something which are not parliamentary, then immediately that is noticed. We will advise the speaker to put it off the record.
Right.
That kind of thing. And when members rise and raise different issues, you know, everything is of course structured now. Now, when a person raises an issue in the House, he has to base himself on a rule. Without that, no member can raise any issue in the House. There are rules which deals with each part of the business. So he will raise an issue on the basis of a rule. And there are so many other things, you know, which one needs to be careful about, so that nothing is said against the rules, against the Constitution, and nothing is said which is defamatory, incriminatory and things like that. All those things. So the Secretary General has to keep a watch on everything that is happening in the House and everything that is said in the House.
Right.
That is it. So that makes it, call it exciting or whatever, but it causes a certain amount of tension, particularly when there are very serious or important businesses taking place in the House. There are heated discussions on issues. Members may say things, you know, which may not be in accordance with the rules or the procedures. And then you have to take a decision. And if it is put off the record, then there will be objection from that side.
Right.
All that. So virtually you are walking on a razor's edge. That's it. Razor's edge. That is where you are as a Secretary General. That is it.
Okay. Sir, you've held one of the most coveted posts of the country, a rank which is equivalent to the Cabinet Secretary. Was politics ever a tempting path for you?
Well, I can say that I was like a lotus flower.
Okay.
A lotus, you know, it sprouts in the water, but it is not affected by, it is not influenced by, in any way by the water or the mud around it.
Right.
So, remains unattached. Whatever be the politics, we are not getting involved in that. We are not to do that. Because when you enter the Lok Sabha Secretariat, the first thing that is taught to you is that we are here to serve the members of Parliament. Members of Parliament, whichever party they belong to, is hardly our concern. They are honourable members of the House. They have been elected by the people of this country. So their needs will have to be looked after. Everyone, without any kind of difference, without any kind of distinction. Each member is the same to us. All are equal. That's the. So that is the principle that we follow, and that is imbibed in us the moment we enter the Lok Sabha. That's it. So politics we always keep apart. We don't introduce, or we don't get influenced by any kind of politics. all are treated equally. That's
Sir, very few former Secretary Generals continue to remain actively engaged with the parliamentary affairs post-retirement. You're one of them who continuously engage with the public, educate the public regarding the parliamentary affairs, legislative functions, the rules and the procedures. So was this something that you envisioned early in your career, or did it happen organically over time?
well, this is a choice which each individual makes. There are people who do not get involved in any such activity. They take a retirement. So that is in real sense a retirement. But I have a totally different approach to this. I want to get engaged in all intellectual pursuits. So I read, I write, I discuss things with people. That gives me a lot of energy, and that sharpens my mind further. So I kind of enjoy it very much, and I cannot visualize a life without these intellectual activities. That's it.
Okay. So coming back to the question of the work of the Secretary General, I would want to ask, how do the Lok Sabha Secretariat and the Rajya Sabha Secretariat help both the houses function?
See, the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha cannot function without the help of the Secretariat. So Secretariat is an inalienable part of the House. In fact, in 1929, when Bidalbhai Patel was elected the Speaker, the first Indian elected as Speaker of the Central Legislative Assembly. In those days, the Parliament was called Central Legislative Assembly.
Yes.
There, when he was elected the Speaker, the secretarial services were performed by the Law Ministry of the government, the Law Department of the government. And the Law Secretary was a secretary. In those days, they were called secretaries.
Right.
So he was a secretary, and his department used to service the Parliament. And Bidalbhai Patel found that it was very unacceptable, because they were loyal to the government. But here is the legislature. Legislature is independent of the executive. Legislature's function is to scrutinize the functioning of the executive. So how can it be guided or serviced by the executive?
Yes.
So that was a very incongruous kind of situation, unacceptable to him. And he wanted an independent secretariat for the Central Legislative Assembly. And initially the government of the day did not accept it. Finally they had to accept it, because a lot of persuasion had to be done. Legislation, the resolutions were passed in the House by people like Motilal Nehru, etc. They brought these resolutions in the House, asking the government to set up a separate secretariat. So finally, it was in 1929 or something, that the independent secretariat was formed. The reason for an independent secretariat is, as I said, the legislature's main function is to scrutinize the work of the government,
Right.
to see whether the executive functions in accordance with the constitution, rules, and so on. That can be done only if there are offices dedicated to Parliament. If there are offices who are loyal to the executive, they will not be able to perform that task,
Right.
That is why Bidalbhai Patel insisted on this, and he got this. Since then, the independent secretariats were formed, established, and they have been servicing the Secretariat.
Right.
So when a question is asked by a member, given notice of by a member, that question is examined in terms of the rules only, not whether it causes any inconvenience to the government or whether it will expose the government or things like that. Such considerations do not come in at all. The question is examined in terms of the rules. So if it has merit and if it is in accordance with the rules, naturally the question will be admitted. That is the thing. But if a member of the executive and a bureaucrat who is attached with part of the executive examines it, he will always think about the interests of the executive.
Yes, yes.
So that is the difference. That is the difference between an independent secretariat. Independent secretariat means a secretariat which is independent of the executive. They are not under the control of the executive. Now there is a provision in the Constitution, Article 98. Article 98 says that there shall be a secretariat for each house and the service rules shall be framed by the President in consultation with the Speaker. That's it.
Right.
And whereas the executive is totally, is governed by Article 309 of the Constitution. So 309 provides for service rules and all that,
Right.
the service conditions and all that. But here, why there is a separate article in the Constitution which deals with the recruitment and service conditions of the Legislature Secretariat employees?
Right.
The reason is, Legislature Secretariat is an independent body meant to service the legislature. And they are not a part of the executive. So they are not under the control of the executive. Now the supreme boss of the executive employees is the President of India. And in the states they are the governors. But here, so far as the employees of the Secretariat are concerned, the boss is the Speaker, not the President. That is the thing. So everything is done in the name of the Speaker, not of the President. Otherwise, in
Right.
Government of India, every order is issued in the name of the President only.
Right.
The President of India is pleased. But here it is the Speaker who is pleased. That is the difference.
Right.
So independent Secretariat of the Legislature needs to be independent because they are performing a function like scrutinizing the functioning of the executive. Therefore, they have to be independent of the executive. They should not be under the influence or control of the executive.
Okay, okay. Sir, as you rightly talked about the need for an independent secretariat, in as simple as something called choosing questions for the question hour in an unbiased manner. But recently we've seen a lot of disruption during the question hour. We recently witnessed the cash for query case. How do you think that these things should be dealt with impartially, and how do you think how should we make the question hour more effective so that these things should be dealt in an effective manner?
But are you referring to the Mohammed Mohitra's case or what?
We have acquisitions of a lot of MPs
See,
getting.
the point is,
yes.
when a member is asking a question, there are rules, very definite rules,
Right.
which govern the admission of question. That means the question has to conform to those rules. That is it. Now, if it conforms to those rules, then this question should be admitted. That is it. So that is the general position. There may be departures from that. I am not familiar with that kind of thing because I spent 40 years in Indian Parliament. And at no time did anybody make a complaint that the questions were disallowed at the behest of the government. That was never raised. That is
Okay.
the thing. But now I do not know under what circumstances this kind of thing is happening. I have, in fact, no direct knowledge. Since I am out of it, I do not know what is happening now. But this used to be the case. Always look at the merit of the question. Does it conform to the rules?
Right.
That is so. And then the most important consideration about a question is whether it has public interest or not. If the issue that is being raised through the question has public interest angle. So if it involves public interest, then the question can be allowed.
Okay.
That's the thing.
Okay. Sir, there was a cash for votes scandal in 2008 during the confidence vote on the India-US nuclear deal. So, what do you think? This actually raises questions about the credibility of the Parliament, because questionnaire is such an important tool where MPs can raise issues of their constituencies. So, what should be the institutional safeguards that we must adopt to avoid situations like these?
You see, that was a very peculiar kind of situation where there was a sting operation.
Right.
A sting operation was done by some people. And they approached some of the members. They had marked those members, identified them. Perhaps they thought that they were vulnerable or something. Went to them, offered money, and requested them to put questions. And some of them fell a prey to that. They took money on the promise that they would put questions.
Right.
But that was actually a very dark spot on the Parliament's fair face, because that shouldn't happen. Members of Parliament should never succumb to this kind of temptation to take money for questions. But I must tell you that this kind of a thing, has happened in other jurisdictions also. But then the members were punished. It is not that the members of Parliament, all of them are angels. There may be some black sheep.
Right.
There may be people who succumb easily to temptations. And after all, they are a part of the society. That's it. But luckily, such people are very few in number. Other members, mostly, my experience is that members of Parliament, they take these questions very seriously. And they put questions highlighting the problems in their constituencies mostly, and then of course national issues and international issues depending on the taste of the member. That's how it is. There, a personal angle, I have never seen a member kind of thinking about taking money, and putting questions like that. But unfortunately on that occasion, it was done like this, and then they were punished. All the members were expelled from the house.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Yes,
So that is the highest and the most serious punishment that is given to the members who do this kind of thing. So Parliament has a mechanism to correct these things by punishing people who are guilty. That's the thing. So.
Okay. So, sir, coming back to the explanation that you provided regarding the establishment of an independent secretariat for both the houses, many members of Parliament do not have a specialized research team, which limits their ability to effectively scrutinize complex legislations and policies. In the US, we have congressional research services, which provide the research personnel for the MPs. So, what do you think be the reforms in the case of the Indian Parliament?
Actually, there are two aspects to it. One is, a member of Parliament, they are lawmakers. So they are passing the law. So for that, they must understand what the law is.
Yes.
everybody is not a lawyer, and therefore everybody cannot understand the legal intricacies of a particular legislation. But they will have an understanding, a general understanding about the purpose of the bill and all that.
Right.
Now, even for that, they need an assistance, some assistance.
Right.
Somebody should tell them, explain to them the key provisions in a bill and the purpose of the bill, the object of the bill. And all
Right.
that kind of a system we don't have. But a member can appoint assistants, and they are paid by the Secretariat. So the members have to choose people who know things and who can help them. That is the only thing which the system does. And if the rest is left to the member, member can take support from anybody he wants.
Okay.
But he must be able to arrange the finance and all that, for such people. Because that needs money. They have to be paid.
Right.
If you pick up somebody from the market, then he must be paid. So the member must be able to do that. Only in that case, that is possible. So that is one thing. That is understanding the purpose of the legislation, the object of the legislation, and the main provisions of the legislation. Second thing is private members' bills. So every member has a right to give a bill on any subject
Right.
which he thinks is serious enough or important. So he has to prepare a bill and he will give it, and then it is balloted and all that. Discussion takes place on Fridays. Now there also he needs assistance. Every member cannot prepare a bill.
Yes.
It's a technical thing. So there also we don't have any systematic arrangement for that. The members, normally they engage people or who prepare the bills. It goes like that. But we don't have a systemic arrangement
Right.
for that.
Okay.
And that is one thing, which is lacking here. And we haven't thought about this kind of a research facility which exists in the American House of Congress and House of Representatives, Senate and all that. So that kind of a system we don't have. In fact, that is something, which is necessary. Only then you will be able to get qualitative services from the members, I think. Otherwise, what happens is that I have found from my experience that some, at least in the House, may not be fully conversant with the bill that is discussed or the intricacies of that.
Okay.
That kind of problem will arise.
Yes.
So that means without knowing all this, member is, voting for that.
Right.
That perhaps is a weakness of the system.
Yes. Sir, what are the institutional arrangements that you suggest must be established to overcome this? Should we have a separate services, or how should we integrate research team with the MPs?
Because every member cannot be given this kind of a secretarial assistance, But we can have a separate wing in the Secretariat with a well-equipped wing where people have legal knowledge
Right. Okay.
and people can help the members of Parliament who want to frame bills and all that. That kind of a system can be created. We have a private members department and all that.
Right.
But they look at their work is not, their remit is not to help members individually. That is not there. They look at the bill, and if there are some deficiencies in the bill,
Right.
prepared by the member, then they will remove those deficiencies and make it foolproof.
Right, right.
Only that they do. But the basic help, which a member needs, that cannot be given, and the system doesn't provide that kind of help. For that, there has to be a separate wing of the Secretariat which can be created, and that wing can take care of this requirement.
Right, right.
That is the thing.
Okay. Sir, coming back to the question, coming back to the parliamentary intervention of question hour, questions are chosen by system of lottery. But when I was working as a legislative assistant to a member of parliament and some of my colleagues also, we witnessed an unofficial trend wherein the questions of a few MPs had more frequency in the questions of a few MPs were listed more frequently. So how does the system work and why does such discrepancy occur?
You see, I must tell you that it's not deliberate. Because if you analyze, if you understand the system, then you will know that it cannot be influenced by anybody. Because it is the names which are balloted.
Right.
And it's quite incidental that a name repeatedly comes, the name of a member. It happens. We do not know how it happens or why it happens. But that is pure chance and nothing else. So names are balloted and then the questions are looked at, examined. And that seems to be the best kind of system, that we can have. I mean, to deal with this kind of thing. Names are balloted, and ballot, you can't help. You are not influencing the ballot. Because members are sitting. In the presence of the members only you are balloting things. So it cannot be more transparent than that.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So coming to the question of committees, the parliamentary committees, how do you think that parliamentary committees are playing the role effectively that they should have?
Well, what are these parliamentary committees? What are they meant for? What is their basic function? One must understand that. And what is the basic function of parliament? The members of parliament, when they take oath, they say that we will faithfully discharge the duty upon which we are about to enter. What exactly is the duty of a member of parliament? We'll look into that. Parliament is a legislative body. It's a supreme legislative body. But lawmaking is not the only function of parliament. In ancient times, when parliament was evolving, that time there were only two functions which were to be performed by the members. One was to make law for the realm. Second was to pass the budget. These are the two functions of parliament. But later on, as parliament evolved, a lot of things, came to be done by parliament. And of course, these are the basic functions. But then a member of parliament has to deal with issues in the house. He has to raise issues. And lawmaking is not the only job, or passing the budget is not the only function. Parliament has to basically scrutinize the function of the government and ensure the accountability of the government. Because that is the basic thing. Accountability is the basis, is the essence of parliamentary democracy. In a parliamentary democracy, you have a parliament and you have an executive which is carved out of parliament, which is collectively responsible to the house. means which is accountable to the House. For everything that they do, they should give an account to the Parliament. That is the thing. So the authority of Parliament is supreme. And you are accountable to the House for every action that you take. So the parliamentary function or the duty of a member of Parliament has to be assessed in this context. Now, Parliament means the collectivity of the members. So the members of Parliament will have to function so that the accountability of the executive is ensured. So there the questions come up. There are different procedural devices which enable the government to ensure the accountability. Now, committees are the most potent, very important, effective, powerful instruments of Parliament to ensure this accountability. Now, the function of Parliament, a function of the government means it's the whole gamut of the functions of the government. It's a huge thing. Governments have grown huge. It's a humongous size of the government, you know. It's something which was unknown earlier. But now, all these various functions will have to be scrutinized by Parliament.
Yes.
And Parliament doesn't have the time or the expertise or, doesn't have the time first of all. So, this function is performed by the committees. Committee is a smaller body which has a mandate and which can perform that in a much more effective way. That is the thing. That is the purpose of committees, parliamentary committees. Now, there are rules and there are, systems are in place for the effective functioning of the committee. In committees, for example, in Indian Parliament, there is an unwritten law, unwritten practice that members of the Parliament, when they are in a committee, they should function in a non-partisan way.
Yes.
This is something, which has been handed down to us by the older generations. They should function in a non-partisan way. That means the committee is meant to report to Parliament how the government is functioning.
Right.
And then the Parliament will decide whether Parliament should support such a government or not. That is, theoretically, that is the position.
Yes.
So the committee should tell the Parliament the truth. For that, the committee should find the truth. How the committee will find the truth? If it functions on a partisan basis, they will not be able to get at the truth.
Yes.
So it has to function in a non-partisan way. That is the thing. And fortunately for us, this tradition, we have set this tradition and we have been continuing with this tradition. Of course, of late, there are some deviations from that. But otherwise, this is the principle, this is the way in which the committees function in a non-partisan way. That's how it is.
Sir, you just talked about that Parliament doesn't have enough time and expertise to scrutinize a complex legislation in detail, and that is why we have parliamentary committees for that. Sir, in this context, how do you analyze the productivity of the Parliament? How has it changed over time, and what were the factors responsible for the shift?
First of all, I must make it very clear that I am not very much impressed by this concept of productivity, Parliament.
Okay.
Because after all, it is not a factory or something where the productivity is very important. Parliament is the law-making body. And apart from law-making, it passes the budget, and then lots of issues are raised in the House, which those issues relating to the problems of the people, problems of the country, all that.
Right.
So how will you bring in this concept of productivity in Parliament? I think it's a totally, this concept, doesn't sit well with the parliamentary system. Therefore, and of course, I hear quite a lot about this productivity. After every session, the presiding officers say that there has been 100% productivity, 105% productivity. I don't know how they reach this figure. There is no yardstick to measure the productivity as such.
Okay.
This is the term which we understand in the context of a factory. Something is produced. Here we are not producing it. It's a different kind of forum where a different kind of work is done. Now, every session, there are some legislative work, legislative agenda. Government has a legislative agenda. Government has decided that so many bills will be brought in. Bills are framed, or bills are given shape, by the government, or bills are thought of by the government only when there is a need in the society for a law. Only then the government thinks about it. Government on its own cannot create a law as such. A law is required. Government feels the need for a law to deal with a particular situation. Only then it comes. Suppose there is no such need for a law on that kind, then government will not bring a law. So if you are going to assess the productivity in this way, now for example, in the 1950s, all the basic laws were made. All the important laws, whether it is the Representation of People Act, or all such important laws and Parliament, constitutional amendment, etc. were brought in the 50s and 60s. So we can say that they had 200% productivity at that time. We never thought about this productivity thing. It was never brought in. This concept was never brought in there. That is, it is something which is coming up only very late. I mean, in these years, during the past 10, 11 years, I've been hearing about it. Before that, we never thought about this productivity.
Okay.
So, I don't actually agree with measuring the productivity of Parliament.
Okay.
That is the thing. And if there is a need for a law, the law will come. And then in every Parliament, members of Parliament will raise issues. That will also depend on whether those issues are arising in the public. That is it.
Right.
Members of Parliament cannot sit down and create issues. These are all related to the needs of the society. That's the thing. So, in my view, that is not a proper concept. Productivity is not a proper concept.
Right. Okay. Sir, as you just talked about that Parliament is not a factory and productivity is a flawed concept, because whenever there is a need of a law will come up. Whenever there is a need to raise any issue, the issues will be raised in the Parliament. But as per PRS Legislative Research's 2023 report, the state assemblies have been performing very low productivity factors on the grounds that the average number of sittings is around 23. Only 4% of the bills are being referred to the committees. So what are the factors that contribute to this persistently low performance of the state legislative assemblies?
See, if they don't have business to sit for 100 days in a year or 200 days in a year, then how will you assess their performance? What is the yardstick with which you will measure their performance? They don't need it. They will not, of course, you meet for 100 days, only when there is a need for that. You have to pass many legislation. For example, in a particular session, the government may bring a lot of bills. That is. And in some other session, They may not have so many bills.
Right.
That is it. They cannot sit down and create bills
Right.
for meeting this requirement. That's not how it is. Well, there is a point in this, that in the legislative assemblies, they are not meeting for as many days as they should. There is a feeling that they meet for a very less number of days and somehow finish the work and then go on.
Right.
That means they are not doing justice to the legislature, because the legislature is supposed to do certain important things, making law. As I told you, when there is a need for a law, the law will come. If there is no need, then law will not come. But then apart from that, there are many other issues, which require the attention of the House. And if members are not able to do that, that means the Assembly is not actually functioning properly. That is the thing. Members must be able to raise issues, and for that there must be enough number of days. They should sit for sufficient number of days.
Right. Right.
So that members get opportunities to raise issues concerning the people.
Okay.
That is there. That is there. There are no two opinions about it.
Okay. Sir, but we see that business is listed every day whenever the session is going on. We have issues that are listed to be raised during the question hour and the 0 hour. But due to frequent disruptions, due to multiple reasons, those things are not taken up. So, how do we measure the productivity of the legislators then?
No, I do not know what advantage you have in using this term, productivity. If the House gets disrupted and the House adjourns earlier than the scheduled date, so that many bills do not come up in the House for discussion and debate.
Right.
And members of the legislature are not able to raise issues, although they had given notice of so many issues and all that.
Right.
Then there is a situation where the legislative assembly is not functioning properly. That is it. Whether it is productivity, the productivity is less or more or whatever. What I am looking at it from this point of view. That means the legislative assembly is not functioning properly. That's the thing. So, why the legislative assembly is not functioning properly? And this happens in Parliament also.
Right.
That is mainly because of certain political reasons. The reason is that there is not much of a bonhomie between the government and the opposition. That is a major factor. There is the trust between the opposition and the government. That has eroded over a period of time.
Right.
The opposition is not trusted by the government, or the government doesn't like the opposition, and therefore deny them the opportunity to raise issues, because when you raise issues, you will be criticizing the government, which we do not like.
Right.
So that is a simple thing. Since the opposition will criticize the government, which the government doesn't like, so block them, either suspend them wholesale, or cut short the days of the session so that they don't raise issues. This kind of attitude. That is not very conducive to the growth of democracy. Parliament is for what? Parliament is for discussion and debate. No, there is an old saying, the opposition will have its say and the government will have its way. That is
Yes.
That sums up the relation between the government and the opposition. Opposition is there to criticize the government. If the head of the government thinks that he is above all this and the opposition cannot criticize me, they should not be allowed to criticize me. It is infra-dig to discuss with them issues, then that will be the end of parliamentary democracy.
Right.
That is the thing. So you have to take the opposition into confidence.
Right.
It is often said that the government and the opposition are two wheels of the cart. If one wheel becomes weak or goes off, the cart will not move, it will remain stuck there.
Yes, yes.
Therefore, for the smooth functioning of a legislature, a kind of cooperation is required between the government and the opposition. And there are many ways in which the trust can be restored. There are many ways.
Right.
Now, for example, since you have raised this issue, I will say that if there is a dispute over a particular issue, the opposition wants to raise an issue which the government wants to block. Government thinks that it is too embarrassing for them. That is no reason why the issue should not be allowed to be raised.
Right.
After all, a government has majority in the House. And therefore, they don't have anything to be afraid of. They have nothing to fear. And the opposition will have it, they will reply. And if it is put to vote, government will in any case, will win. What is the problem?
Right.
But this is not how they are looking at things. That is. Block the opposition. That seems to be the thinking of the government. Wherever they are, whether it is at the center or in the states, same thing is happening.
Right.
But if, suppose, the Chief Minister of a state or the Prime Minister here calls the leaders of the opposition to his chamber and says, look here, these are the issues. I want to take you into confidence. These are the issues. And if this issue is highlighted, this will go against us, the country, in this way. If you highlight these issues, this will be used by our enemies.
Right.
And we will have a very embarrassing situation in the international forums. Therefore, don't discuss it.
Right.
I would request you not to discuss it. They will understand it. The point is that such a meeting should be there. Only then government will be able to explain to these people. Otherwise, they won't know.
Right.
Government has a certain angle, so they will present that angle before them and they will understand it.
Right.
Things can be sorted out. This is the way in which, in a parliament, disputes are settled. After all, differences occur on the question of allowing the opposition to have its say. Often, the ruckus or the house gets disrupted mainly because the opposition has a grievance that their demands are not being met.
Right.
That is the thing. So if you look deeper into these things, you will find that this is the basic issue.
Right.
This is the basic cause of disruptions of the house. And this is not something, this is not like the Indo-China border dispute or anything. This can be easily settled. You want to raise this issue? Yes, you raise that issue. But so far as this particular issue is concerned, this may cause some embarrassment to the government outside. So let us not discuss it now. This kind of approach, that means a very transparent approach. You place all the cards on the table. That's how it is.
Right.
But if you are not placing the cards on the table, then the system will not work, the system will suffer. This is precisely what is happening.
Okay. Sir, talking about the disruptions in the parliament, these days MPs have come up with new forms of protest like slogans, placards, bands and t-shirts and bags with something written on them. Are they allowed as per the Lok Sabha rules?
These are not allowed. Even if the rule doesn't say anything about, I would say these are not to be allowed. House has a certain sanctity. You cannot spoil that sanctity, by using these kind of things. Placards in the house, it's absolutely forbidden, should not be allowed.
Right.
And wearing a particular dress. I mean, they are members of parliament, elected by 15 to 25 lakhs of people. So they should maintain that decorum in the house.
Right.
No, these are not to be allowed at all.
Okay. Sir, coming back to the performance of the Indian Parliament, let's talk this in the context of the world. How would you assess the performance of the Indian Parliament in comparison to other countries which established their parliament around the same time or in the same post-colonial conditions?
See, every parliament has its own way of functioning. And every parliament has its own problems also.
Right.
But in India, because of the adversarial relationship between the government and the opposition, often things, take a kind of a different different course, or things become difficult, get out of control and all that, because of the sharp division between the government and the opposition. That creates problems. Then the government will not talk to the opposition. Opposition will be crying aloud, and nothing happens. Government, kind of stonewall any kind of discussion. That way, system will not work. It will not work at all. For that, you must have open mind, and you must be prepared to meet the other side, and only then kind of mutual trust and a kind of a commitment to the system. That if you are aware of that, if you become conscious of that, your commitment to the system. After all, you are committed to kind of work the system, and how best you can do to see that the system works. These are the considerations. These should be the considerations. Now, this committee system you mentioned, committees function on the basis that they should work in a non-partisan way. Why? Because that is the most logical thing. If you work in a partisan way, then you will not be able to find the truth.
Right.
That is it. And you must find the truth. You must report the truth to Parliament. This is how it is. So, it is the requirement of the system. That's it. If you don't do that, then you will be working against the system. What else is?
So we've almost reached towards the end of the interview. But sir, before we let you go, we have a quick, fun, light-hearted, rapid-fire round with you. I ask you a question. Whatever first comes in your mind, you have to say that. So can we start? Okay. We begin now. Favorite speaker of Lok Sabha?
Yes, my favorite speakers of Lok Sabha were, number one, Professor Hiran Mukherjee of the CPI, Indrajit Gupta of the CPI, Atal Bihari Vajpayee of BJP, Shyamanandan Mishra of the Congress organization, old one kind of thing. And these were the members,
Right.
whom I liked, my favorite people.
Okay. So favorite Prime Minister from a parliamentary perspective?
Favorite Prime Minister from a parliamentary perspective was Rajiv Gandhi and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh.
Okay. May I just add one more leg to this question? May I know the reasons why?
Reason is, they are very, there are something which I can't immediately specify the reasons as such.
Right.
But there were such personalities who, they enhance the stature of that office by the way they dealt with issues, and their approach to the problems of the country,
Right.
approach to different sections or different, different sections of the people, country. Their effort to take all the people together,
Right.
unite the country emotionally, all that.
Okay.
They were the people who, had that vision.
Okay.
And of course, Nehru I had not seen, but he, I always hold him in very high esteem. Pandit Nehru, who in fact laid the foundation for the democracy in our
Right.
country, the parliamentary traditions and all that, These are all laid down by him only, I think.
Okay. So, if you could amend one part of the constitution today, what would it be?
I would amend the provision regarding the Citizenship Act. Citizenship, there is this chapter of citizenship. There, the Parliament has been given absolute power
Yes.
to amend the citizenship law, which can even go counter to the scheme laid down in that chapter.
Right. Okay. Sir, longest debate you remember in Parliament?
Longest debate, I can't specify because there were many debates which, the longest debate, is mostly on the railway budget.
Okay.
That members will sit throughout the night, and at early morning at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, they will adjourn the House. That is it. Only after daybreak, the House adjourns.
Okay.
But then, normally when the House adjourns, they say that we will adjourn for the next day. But on that day, we will say, we will adjourn at 11, we will reassemble at 11 o'clock today.
Oh, okay.
So that was the longest. But then you can't say that it is a debate. The people will be just reading some kind of stuff, which they have brought about the railway demand. Some railway line should be constructed in their constituency, all that kind of thing. That is not a debate. But in terms of the time taken, that was the longest.
Okay. Most overused phrase in Parliament?
With greatest respect to the honourable member on the other side.
Okay. Most dramatic walkout you have ever witnessed?
Walkout used to be done on many occasions. There was a walkout which was a very dramatic walkout by the entire opposition. That was on the Bofes issue, I think,
Yes.
in the 80s. And I think that.
Okay. Which politician would have made a great constitutional law professor?
Well, there was no member in the Parliament who can, because he has to be a constitutional expert.
Yeah. Anybody from outside?
Anybody?
Anybody from outside the Parliament? If you could.
Outside the Parliament. Well, outside the Parliament, constitutional experts. There are
Related to the Parliament. I mean, somebody who functions as part of the Parliament.
For example, Kapil Sibal, of course, he makes the grade. Okay.
Right. Okay. If you had to sum up your feelings about the Parliament in one dialogue of any movie that you watch, what would it be?
Well, see, Indian democracy will survive if Parliament survives. If Parliament doesn't survive, then Indian democracy will go. I think.
Sir, now a quick word association round. I will speak out the name of a few leaders, and whatever quality or whatever first thing comes in your mind, you have to say that. Ms. Meera Kumar.
Well, Meera Kumar was not a very vocal member or anything when she was a member. And I had association with her only when she became the speaker. And I will not say anything about
Okay.
my relationship with her when she was a speaker and I was a Secretary General.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Somnath Chatterjee?
Somnath Chatterjee was a great man. He was one of our best speakers.
Okay.
A person who was well versed in the parliamentary system and its working. And although outwardly he may look very rough and intimidatory and all that kind of thing, but inwardly he was all syrup and juice. A very considerate person and all that. A very kind-hearted person.
Okay. Okay. Sir, Dr. Manmohan Singh?
Manmohan Singh was a great person, I must say. I mean, he has a very deep understanding of not only economics, but also politics. He knew what was happening.
Right.
Maybe he had no control over many things, but he knew what was happening. But then he was an extremely decent person, who always adhered to the norms. That thing. He would never abuse the opposition. He had respect for all. A great man.
Okay. Sir, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee?
Oh, Vajpayee was a fantastic person, a great orator.
Yes.
And a person who was, who was cast in the Nehruvian mold, I must say. Because he inherited all that was started or laid down by Nehru. That's the thing.
Yes.
So, very sophisticated. Had a clear vision about things, a larger vision. He's a person who would take everybody along with him.
Right. Okay.
Such leaders are very rare. A great leader whom I respect very, very greatly.
And sir, the last, Mrs. Indira Gandhi and the emergency.
Well, Indira Gandhi, Indira Gandhi was a leader in her own right. But she was a very tough person. She was not much of a Democrat.
Okay.
But she was a leader. And she knew the problems of the country, she knew the mind of the country. And she led the country in a very difficult situation. She led a war to victory. And all that, but she had that authoritarian streak in her, which led her to declare an emergency.
Right.
That is the thing. So, it's a difficult person.
Okay. With this, we come to the end of the interview. Sir, with a very heavy heart, I will have to draw curtains to this enriching conversation. Had there been no paucity of time, I would have loved to chatter endlessly with you and to gain your valuable insights. On behalf of the entire Sunset Flix team and our viewers, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to you for helping us understand not just the letter of the Constitution, but also the spirit of the Constitution. We hope to have you with us again very soon, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, I must say that I enjoyed being questioned by you.
Thank you.
And you have, in fact, dealt with whole gamut of issues concerning Parliament and the Constitution and all that. I enjoyed it very much because this kind of intellectual exercise I always welcome and enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. For more such interesting, enriching talks with experts, stay tuned only on Sunset Flix.